Rain pelts against the windshield as Vanessa Marshall drives her Bentley through the wealthy suburbs of Greenwich, Connecticut. The tech CEO just closed a billion-dollar acquisition deal, one that will cement her social media platform as a global powerhouse. Her phone buzzes with congratulatory messages, but her triumph is about to be shattered by red and blue lights flashing in her rearview mirror. Officer James Reeves approaches her window, hand resting on his holstered weapon. His face twists with disgust when he sees a black woman behind the wheel of a luxury car. Despite her calm compliance, he snatches her ID with unconcealed contempt. What happens next will ignite a firestorm across America. As Vanessa's dashcam records, Officer Reeves deliberately burns her driver's license, smugly believing he's putting another minority in their place. But Vanessa Marshall isn't just any driver. She's a self-made billionaire with the resources and platform to ensure this act of racism won't be brushed aside. Her viral video will force a reckoning within the police department, expose deep-rooted corruption, and push Officer Reeves to confront his own prejudices as his actions tear his family apart. One traffic stop, 2 lives forever changed, a nation forced to face its demons. Before we start this story of power, privilege, and justice, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The fluorescent lights of Marshall Tech's headquarters cast a harsh glow across the empty office floor. At this hour, only Vanessa Marshall remained, her stilettos clicking against polished marble as she paced before floor-to-ceiling windows. San Francisco's nightscape sparkled below, a view she'd earned through years of ruthless innovation and calculated risks. Her phone buzzed. "The softcore acquisition papers are ready," her chief counsel said. "We can close this deal tonight." Vanessa smiled, running her fingers along the cool glass. "Send them through. I want this wrapped up before the market opens." She moved to her desk, a minimalist masterpiece of glass and steel, and opened her laptop. The contract appeared on screen, $5 billion condensed into 40 pages of legal text. Each clause represented months of negotiation, countless sleepless nights, and another step toward making Marshall Tech the dominant force in social media security. As she scrolled through the document, a notification popped up. Her driver, Marcus, was waiting in the garage. Vanessa dismissed it with a wave. Tonight, she wanted to drive herself. The thrill of victory deserved the purr of her Bentley's engine, the satisfaction of controlling her own path home. She signed the contract with a digital flourish. Within seconds, confirmation emails flooded her inbox. Congratulations from board members, investment banks, lawyers. They doubted her when she proposed the acquisition 6 months ago. Now they scrambled to praise her vision. The elevator descended to the private garage, its mirrored walls reflecting her composed expression. At 42, Vanessa had mastered the art of controlled success. Her charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, every detail crafted to command respect in rooms where she was often the only black face present. Her Bentley Continental waited in its reserved spot, midnight blue paint gleaming under LED lights. Vanessa settled into the leather driver's seat, inhaling the familiar scent of success. The engine started with a gentle rumble, and she guided the car onto the empty streets of the financial district. As she merged onto the highway, her mind drifted to tomorrow's press conference. The acquisition would reshape the tech landscape, cementing Marshall Tech's position as the leading platform for secure social communication. 5 years ago, she'd been called crazy for focusing on privacy features. Now, with data breaches making weekly headlines, her foresight had paid off. The GPS directed her through increasingly residential areas. Vanessa had chosen her home in the wealthy suburbs carefully, a modern mansion that balanced luxury with security. The neighboring tech executives had initially been cool toward her presence. Money spoke louder than prejudice, but old habits died hard in these exclusive envelopes of privilege. Red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Vanessa checked her speed automatically, though she knew she'd been driving precisely at the limit. The police cruiser had appeared from nowhere, tailing her through the quiet streets. She signaled and pulled over, muscle memory from countless similar stops guiding her actions. Documentation ready, hands visible on the steering wheel. The routine was familiar, a tax paid in dignity by successful Black Americans. Her dashcam recorded automatically, another precaution learned through experience. Officer James Reeves approached with measured steps, flashlight beams sweeping across her face. 23 years on the force had taught him to read people quickly. The luxury car in this neighborhood had caught his attention. The driver's identity confirmed his suspicions. "License and registration," he barked, hand resting on his holstered weapon. Vanessa reached slowly for her documents, maintaining eye contact through the window. "Good evening, officer. Here you are." Reeves snatched the papers, studying her license with exaggerated scrutiny. His lip curled as he read her address. "You live in Hillcrest Estates?" "Yes, officer." For the past 3 years, he shined the flashlight through her car, searching for anything suspicious. The interior was immaculate, like everything else in Vanessa's life. "Step out of the vehicle." "May I ask why?" "I haven't violated any traffic laws." "Out, now." Vanessa complied, her heels clicking on asphalt. The night air carried a chill, but that wasn't why she shivered. 2 decades of success hadn't immunized her against moments like this, when authority stripped away her carefully constructed armor. "Is there a problem, officer?" She kept her voice steady, professional. Reeves held up her license, examining it under his flashlight. "This doesn't look right to me. Plenty of fakes going around." "That's a valid California driver's license. You can verify it through dispatch." His response was to pull out a lighter. The flame danced beneath her license, plastic beginning to bubble and curl. "Oops, looks like it was fake after all." Destroying fraudulent documents is standard procedure. Vanessa's hand tightened around her phone, already recording. "Officer Reeves, I can see your nameplate. You're deliberately destroying my valid identification. This is harassment. You calling me racist?" He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "That's a serious accusation. Could be interpreted as interfering with a police officer. Maybe we should continue this discussion downtown." Another set of headlights approached. A second patrol car pulled up, and a younger officer stepped out. "Everything okay here, Jim?" Recognition flickered across the younger officer's face as he looked at Vanessa. She saw the exact moment he realized who she was. What was happening? His hand went to his radio. "Miss Marshall? Vanessa Marshall?" The younger officer moved between them. "Officer Reeves, this is the CEO of Marshall Tech. Her identity is confirmed." Reeves faltered, glancing at the melted remains of her license in his hand. The dashcam recorded his expression shifting from smug superiority to dawning comprehension. He'd burned the idea of a billionaire while being recorded from multiple angles. "You're free to go, Miss Marshall," the younger officer said quickly. "We apologize for any inconvenience." Vanessa retrieved her registration from Reeves' slack grip. "Officer Chen," she read his nameplate. "Thank you for your professionalism. Officer Reeves, you'll be hearing from my attorneys, and this footage will be reviewed by your superiors." She returned to her car with measured steps, maintaining her composure until the door closed behind her. Only then did her hands shake as she gripped the steering wheel. Rage and humiliation warred in her chest, familiar companions from a lifetime of similar incidents, but this time would be different. She had power now, real power. Not just wealth, but a platform reaching millions. Officer James Reeves had just made the biggest mistake of his career, and Vanessa Marshall would ensure he faced the consequences. She pressed a button on her phone, connecting to her head of legal. "Clear your schedule for tomorrow. We have a situation to address. And get me the contact information for the police commissioner." The Bentley's engine purred to life. In her rearview mirror, she could see the 2 officers arguing, Reeves gesturing angrily while Chen spoke into his radio. By morning, that footage would be spreading across the country. One more viral video of police misconduct. But this time the victim had the resources to demand real change. Vanessa guided her car through the quiet streets, mind already formulating strategy. She'd built her empire by turning setbacks into opportunities. Tonight's humiliation would become a catalyst for transformation. Officer Reeves thought he was putting her in her place. Instead, he'd given her a new mission. The gates of her estate opened automatically as she approached. Security cameras tracked her progress up the winding driveway, part of the protective infrastructure she'd installed when she bought the property. She'd learned early that success made you a target. Tonight had reinforced. Vanessa connected her phone to her computer. The footage uploaded automatically to her secure servers. Tomorrow, it would begin its journey across social media, carefully timed for maximum impact. The press would devour it, coming off the high of her acquisition announcement. She studied Officer Reeves' face in a frozen frame, his contempt captured in high definition. He'd probably done this dozens of times before. Secure in the knowledge that his victims lacked the means to fight back, that safety net had just been ripped away. Her phone buzzed with messages from the legal team, confirming meetings and strategy sessions for the morning. Vanessa let them pile up unanswered. She needed this moment to feel the full weight of what had happened, to let it fuel her resolve. The wealthy suburbs slept peacefully outside her windows, unaware that their carefully maintained order was about to be disrupted. Change always made people uncomfortable, but comfort, Vanessa had learned, was the enemy of progress. She opened her laptop and began to write, laying out her thoughts for tomorrow's press conference. The words flowed easily, shaped by years of experience and decades of suppressed anger. By morning, Officer James Reeves would become the face of everything wrong with policing in America. And Vanessa Marshall would become something more than just another successful CEO. She would become a force for change, wielding her influence like a scalpel to excise the cancer of systemic racism. One traffic stop, meant to put her in her place, would instead launch a movement. Her fingers paused over the keyboard as her security system alerted her to movement at the gates. News vans were already gathering, tipped off by someone at the police department. Good, let them come. She had a story to tell, and after tonight, the whole world would be listening. Dawn broke over San Francisco as Vanessa's video began its viral journey across the internet. Her social media team had released it strategically, first on MarshallTech's own platform, then watching it spread organically to Twitter, Facebook, and beyond. Within hours, the footage of Officer Reeves burning her license had been viewed millions of times. Vanessa sat in her home office, watching the numbers climb. News networks had been calling since sunrise, their vans still crowded outside her gates. She'd given them nothing yet, letting the video speak for itself. The comment sections exploded with outrage, her name trending worldwide alongside hashtags demanding justice. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Marcus Chen, her head of security. The death threats are starting to come in. We're logging everything, but some are concerning enough to forward to the FBI. Any specific patterns? Vanessa kept her voice steady, though her hand tightened on her coffee cup. Most are from burner accounts, but we've traced a few to law enforcement IP addresses. The police union is already pushing back, claiming the video was edited. She set down her coffee. Send everything to legal, and double the security detail at headquarters. The morning light filled her office as she stood, walking to the windows. Below, reporters jostled for position at her gates. They wanted their pound of flesh, their soundbite of the powerful black woman brought low by systemic racism. But Vanessa had learned long ago not to give anyone what they expected. Her phone buzzed with a message from her board chair. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. They'd be worried about stock prices, public relations, the potential impact on the Softcore acquisition. The same board members who'd praised her vision yesterday would now urge caution, compromise, settlement. Vanessa changed into a crisp white suit, her armor for the battles ahead. As her driver navigated through the media gauntlet, she watched clips of the police department's first press statement. They'd placed Reeves on administrative leave pending investigation, their spokesman reading carefully worded statements about taking all allegations seriously. MarshallTech's headquarters buzzed with nervous energy as she arrived. Employees watched her pass, their expressions a mix of sympathy and uncertainty. The video had transformed their CEO from a tech visionary into a symbol overnight. Some seemed unsure how to react. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. 12 faces turned toward her, most white, most male, all concerned about their investments. Martin Whitman, the board chair, spoke first. Vanessa, we've drafted a statement accepting the police department's apology and announcing a joint initiative for community policing. If we move quickly, we can get ahead of this. She sat at the head of the table, surveying the faces before her. The department hasn't apologized. They've placed a racist officer on paid vacation while they wait for this to blow over. That's not acceptable. The stock is down 12 points. Another board member interjected. Softcore is getting nervous. We need to contain this situation. Contain? Vanessa's voice cut through the room. I built this company by addressing problems, not containing them. Officer Reeves thought he could abuse his power because I'm black. He's done it before, and he's not alone. That's the situation we need to address. This isn't our fight, Whitman argued. We're a tech company, not a social justice organization. Everything is our fight. Our platform connects millions of people. It shapes conversations, influences opinions. We can use that power to demand real change. The debate raged for hours. Vanessa faced down every argument for compromise, every suggestion to let the system work. By the time she left the boardroom, she had their reluctant support, backed by the implicit threat of what her resignation would do to their stock price. Her phone buzzed with a new alert. Officer Reeves had given an interview to a conservative news network, claiming he felt threatened during the stop. The comment section filled with supporters calling her angry, aggressive, playing on tired stereotypes of black women in power. They've already started the character assassination, her PR director said, rushing to keep up as Vanessa strode toward her office. We should prepare a response. No response needed. Let them show their true colors. She paused at her office door. Instead, I want you to find others. People Officer Reeves has harassed, profiled, abused. There will be more. By afternoon, the stories began pouring in. Dozens of people coming forward with similar experiences, not just with Reeves, but with his entire department. Videos, testimonials, documented complaints that had been buried or dismissed. A pattern emerging that couldn't be ignored. Vanessa reviewed each case personally, her anger building with every account. The same department, the same excuses, the same lives disrupted by unchecked power. She'd been lucky enough to have wealth and influence as protection. Most victims had neither. Her security team reported more threats, increasingly specific and violent. White supremacist groups had posted her address online. Police unions across the country released statements defending Reeves, attacking her character, questioning her motives. The pressure to back down mounted. Corporate partners expressed concerns about being associated with controversy. Advertisers threatened to pull campaigns. Each threat strengthened her resolve. As evening approached, she received an unexpected call. Sarah Reeves, the officer's daughter, wanted to meet privately. The security team advised against it, but Vanessa agreed. Sometimes the most important conversations happened away from cameras. They met in a private room at a downtown restaurant. Sarah Reeves was younger than Vanessa had expected, her mixed-race children playing quietly in the corner. The reason for her father's reaction to Vanessa became clearer, more personal, more tragic. "He refused to attend my wedding," Sarah explained, her voice tight with old pain. "Wouldn't acknowledge his grandchildren. I thought he might change when he saw them, but he just grew more bitter, more angry." Vanessa watched the children drawing, innocent of the storm surrounding their grandfather. "Has he shown any remorse since the video?" "He says he was just doing his job. That everyone's against police now, no one understands the pressure." Sarah met Vanessa's gaze. "But I saw his face when he realized who you were. Not regret for what he did, just fear of consequences." The meeting lasted hours. Two women from different worlds finding common ground in their experience of prejudice. Sarah shared stories of growing up with a father whose love was conditional on her choices, whose worldview couldn't expand to include her happiness. As they parted, Sarah hesitated. "What happens next?" "Justice," Vanessa replied. "Not just for me, but for everyone your father has hurt. The department will have to change." Back in her office, Vanessa reviewed the latest media coverage. The story had evolved beyond a single incident into a national conversation about police reform. Her team had prepared a comprehensive proposal for department oversight, body camera requirements, and bias training. A text message lit up her phone. The police union had scheduled a press conference for tomorrow, promising to reveal evidence that would vindicate Officer Reeves. They thought they could intimidate her, force her to back down like so many victims before. Vanessa smiled grimly. They still didn't understand who they were dealing with. She'd built an empire by turning obstacles into opportunities. Now she would use that same determination to force change in a system that had resisted it for too long. "CNN wants to know if you'll appear on their morning show tomorrow." "Book it," Vanessa said, "and schedule a press conference for afterward. It's time to launch our police accountability initiative." She worked late into the night, refining proposals, reviewing legal strategies, building alliances with civil rights organizations. The death threats continued, each one archived as evidence of the hatred she was fighting. Outside her window, San Francisco glittered beneath a starless sky. Somewhere out there, Officer Reeves probably sat in his home, comfortable in his paid leave, believing the system would protect him as it always had. He didn't realize that his actions had awakened something larger than himself. Vanessa Marshall had spent her life breaking barriers in the tech world. Now she would use that experience, that influence, to break down the walls protecting bad officers from accountability. The video of her traffic stop was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new attacks, new attempts to discredit her. But she was ready. She had truth on her side, resources at her disposal, and a lifetime of experience facing down those who underestimated her. Her phone buzzed one last time. Another death threat, this one traced to a police department computer. Vanessa added it to the evidence file, her determination hardening. They thought they could scare her into silence. Instead, they had given her a cause worth fighting for. Morning sunlight streamed through the CNN studio windows as Vanessa adjusted her earpiece. The makeup artist made final touches while producers bustled around, their excitement palpable. This would be her first public statement since the incident, and viewership numbers were already breaking records. 3 minutes to air, a producer called out. "Miss Marshall, we'll start with the traffic stop footage, then cut to you for response." Vanessa nodded, her expression carefully composed. She'd chosen her appearance carefully. A deep purple suit that conveyed authority without aggression, natural hair styled elegantly, minimal jewelry. Every detail calculated to present strength and professionalism. The anchor, Jessica Chen, settled into her chair across the desk. "Any topics off limits? Ask whatever you want." Vanessa replied. I have nothing to hide. The countdown began. Vanessa watched the monitors as they played the now familiar footage. Officer Reeves approaching her car, his contemptuous expression, the deliberate destruction of her license. The video had been viewed over 50 million times in the past 24 hours. We're here with Vanessa Marshall, CEO of Marshall Tech, discussing her encounter with police that has sparked nationwide controversy. Jessica began. Miss Marshall, what went through your mind during this incident? What went through my mind was that this wasn't about me, Vanessa responded. Officer Reeves didn't know I was a CEO. He saw a black woman in an expensive car and made assumptions. His actions reflect a deeper problem in policing that affects countless Americans who don't have my resources to fight back. The interview continued for 30 minutes. Vanessa parried questions about settlement offers and police union statements, keeping focus on systemic issues. When Jessica asked about the death threats, she turned it into a discussion of intimidation tactics used to silence victims of police misconduct. We're launching the Justice Through Technology initiative today, Vanessa announced. Marshall Tech will provide free body cameras and data storage to police departments nationwide, with civilian oversight of footage access. We're also creating a platform for reporting and tracking police misconduct incidents. Social media exploded with responses. Police unions condemned her initiative as anti-law enforcement. Civil rights organizations praised her leadership. Tech analysts debated the business implications. Through it all, Vanessa maintained her message of systemic change. Back at Marshall Tech headquarters, her team was already implementing the initiative. Engineers adapted their security software for body camera integration. Lawyers drafted agreements for department partnerships. Marketing prepared materials emphasizing accountability and transparency. A notification popped up on her phone. Officer Reeves had scheduled his own press conference, backed by the police union. They would try to discredit her, paint her as an angry black woman attacking law enforcement. She'd seen this playbook before. Her security chief appeared at her office door. We've identified credible threats from 3 white supremacist groups. They're coordinating online attacks against you and the company. Forward everything to the FBI, Vanessa instructed, and increase security at our satellite offices. They might target our employees. The afternoon brought a parade of meetings. Civil rights leaders wanted partnerships. Politicians sought endorsements. Competitors tried to gauge how her initiative would affect the market. Through each conversation, Vanessa stayed focused on concrete actions, not symbolic gestures. Sarah Reeves called again. Her father was unraveling under the pressure, drinking heavily, making threats. The department had taken his service weapon, concerned about his mental state. His grandchildren were asking questions he couldn't answer. He needs to take responsibility, Vanessa told her, not just for what he did to me, but for his whole career of bias and abuse. The department's internal investigation is uncovering more victims every day. The police union press conference began at 4. Officer Reeves stood at the podium, his uniform pressed, his expression defiant. He claimed he'd felt threatened during the stop, that Vanessa had been confrontational. The union president accused her of exploiting the situation for publicity. Vanessa watched from her office, noting how they avoided addressing the video evidence. They focused instead on Reeves's 23 years of service, his commendations, his family's police legacy. When reporters asked about his disciplinary record, they deflected to statistics about officer safety. Her phone rang. The police commissioner wanted a private meeting. The department was hemorrhaging public support, facing mounting pressure for reform. They wanted to discuss implementing her initiative, but needed to save face. I'll meet tomorrow, Vanessa agreed. Bring your body camera procurement team and IT directors. This isn't about politics, it's about real change. As evening approached, her team presented the first data from their incident reporting platform. Hundreds of stories flooding in, painting a picture of systematic discrimination. Patterns emerged, showing problem officers, departments, and practices. The evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa reviewed each report personally, seeing her own experience reflected in countless others. People pulled over for driving while black, harassed for being in the wrong neighborhood, treated with suspicion and contempt by those sworn to protect them. Her assistant interrupted with urgent news. A group of reform-minded officers had come forward, offering to help implement her initiative from inside the department. They were risking their careers to support change, tired of watching colleagues abuse their power. Set up a secure meeting, Vanessa instructed. We need their perspective to make this work. The day's final meeting was with her board. Stock prices had stabilized as investors recognized the business potential of her police accountability platform. The same directors who'd urged caution now praised her vision, seeing profit in social justice. We're not just selling technology, Vanessa reminded them. We're changing the relationship between police and communities. The profits matter less than the impact. Night fell over San Francisco as she reviewed the next day's schedule. Meetings with community leaders, technical briefings on the body camera system, interviews with international media. The movement was growing beyond her traffic stop into something larger. A text message lit up her phone. Sarah Reeves again, more urgent this time. Her father had been drinking, making threats against Vanessa and the company. He'd shown up at Sarah's house, ranting about conspiracy and revenge. She'd called the police on her own father. Vanessa forwarded the information to her security team, then sat back, considering the human cost of change. Officer Reeves was a symptom of a deeper sickness in American policing. Curing that sickness would be painful for everyone involved. Her phone buzzed with another death threat, this one more graphic than usual. The sender had included her home address, her daily schedule, details that suggested police sources. They meant to frighten her into silence, not realizing that every threat strengthened her resolve. Outside her window, protesters had gathered, not against her, but in support. They carried signs demanding police accountability, chanting slogans about justice and change. The movement she'd sparked was taking on a life of its own. Vanessa thought about Officer Reeves, imagining him watching the same protests from his home. He probably felt like a victim, unable to see how his actions reflected generations of systemic racism. His world was changing, and he didn't know how to change with it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistance, new opportunities for progress. The Justice Through Technology initiative would face technical hurdles, political opposition, institutional inertia. But Vanessa Marshall had built her career on overcoming obstacles. Final media numbers for the day. The story has reached over 200 million people worldwide. Police accountability is trending in every major market. Vanessa nodded, already planning next steps. One traffic stop had opened a door for change. Now she would use every resource at her disposal to keep that door from closing. Officer Reeves had tried to put her in her place. Instead, he'd helped her find her purpose. The police commissioner's office felt smaller than Vanessa expected. Its wood paneling and outdated furniture, a stark contrast to Marshalltech's sleek modernity. Commissioner Bradford sat behind his desk, flanked by department lawyers and IT staff. Their discomfort was visible as Vanessa's team presented the Justice Through Technology initiative. "Your body camera proposal is ambitious," Bradford admitted, "but implementation would require significant changes to department policy." "That's the point," Vanessa replied. "The current policies protect officers like James Reeves while hiding systematic abuse from public view." As if summoned by his name, a folder landed on the desk between them. Internal Affairs had completed their preliminary investigation into Officer Reeves' record. 23 years of complaints, incidents, and disciplinary actions, most buried or dismissed. 67 documented complaints of racial profiling, Vanessa read aloud. 12 instances of excessive force, all swept under the rug. How many lives has he damaged while your department looked the other way? The commissioner shifted uncomfortably. Those incidents were investigated according to department policy. Policies designed to protect officers rather than citizens. That changes now. While they debated implementation details, Vanessa's phone buzzed with news alerts. Investigative journalists had begun publishing their own findings about Reeves. Interviews with past victims painted a picture of systematic harassment spanning decades. A black teenager stopped and searched weekly while walking to school. A Hispanic family threatened with deportation during a traffic stop. An Indian tech worker physically removed from his own home after a neighbor reported a suspicious person. Each story added weight to the movement for reform. Sarah Reeves watched the coverage from her living room, her children playing nearby. The stories matched patterns she'd observed growing up. Incidents her father had bragged about at family dinners. His racism had poisoned their relationship long before she married a black man. Her phone rang. Her father, drunk again, demanding she defend him publicly. "You know how dangerous these people are?" he slurred. "I was protecting our community." "Your grandchildren are these people," Sarah replied. "You're protecting nothing but your own prejudice." She hung up as someone knocked on her door. 2 internal affairs investigators stood outside, looking grave. They needed to discuss her father's recent behavior, threats he'd made against Miss Marshall and Marshalltech. Back at police headquarters, the technology meeting continued. Vanessa's team demonstrated their body camera software, showing how civilian oversight boards could access footage without compromising officer safety. The department's IT director raised concerns about costs. Marshalltech will cover initial implementation, Vanessa stated, including hardware, storage, and training. "We're investing in change, not profit." Her phone buzzed again. Officer Reeves had given another interview. this time to a far-right website. He claimed the department was sacrificing good officers to political correctness, that crime would skyrocket without aggressive policing. The commissioner noticed her expression. Reeves doesn't speak for this department, but he represented it for 23 years, Vanessa countered. How many others like him are still on patrol? The meeting ended with tentative agreements on implementation timelines. As Vanessa's team packed up their presentations, Bradford held her back. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. We've uncovered connections between Reeves and several white supremacist organizations. Online posts, financial transactions, meeting attendance. It goes beyond individual bias. Vanessa absorbed this information, thinking of Sarah and her children. Does she know? We're briefing her today. There's concern about her safety. The drive back to Marshalltech headquarters gave Vanessa time to process. Officer Reeves wasn't just a racist cop, but an active participant in organized hate groups. His traffic stops weren't random harassment, but targeted intimidation. Her security chief met her in the lobby. More threats had come in, some referencing the same organizations Reeves was connected to. They'd increased protective details around key employees and facilities. Vanessa's afternoon schedule was packed with media interviews. Each outlet wanted her reaction to the latest revelations about Reeves. She stayed focused on systemic change, refusing to let his individual story overshadow the larger movement. Sarah Reeves called again after meeting with Internal Affairs. Her voice shook as she described discovering the extent of her father's involvement with hate groups. Photos of him at rallies, posts calling for racial violence, donations to extremist causes. I kept making excuses, Sarah whispered, telling myself he just needed time to change, to accept my family. But he was actively working to harm people like my husband, my children. Vanessa offered support, connecting her with security resources and counseling services. As she hung up, her assistant appeared with more news. Reform-minded officers had provided evidence of other department members involved in extremist groups. The investigation was expanding beyond one officer's misconduct into a deeper rot within the department. Commissioner Bradford called an emergency press conference, announcing expanded internal investigations and immediate policy changes. Vanessa watched from her office as Bradford detailed the preliminary findings. The commissioner looked shaken, his usual confidence replaced by genuine concern. The department's image of professional policing was crumbling under scrutiny. Her phone rang again. A detective from Internal Affairs wanted to discuss new threats they'd intercepted. Officer Reeves had been meeting with known extremists, making alarming statements about Vanessa and Marshalltech. They were increasing surveillance on him. Night fell as Vanessa reviewed implementation plans for the body camera initiative. Other departments across the country were reaching out, interested in adopting similar programs. The movement was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. Her security team delivered their evening briefing. Officer Reeves had been spotted near Marshalltech offices, appearing unstable. His police union representation had dropped him after learning about his extremist connections. He was increasingly isolated and unpredictable. Sarah called one last time. Her father had shown up at her house again, demanding to see his grandchildren. When she refused, he'd become violent. Police had arrested him for disorderly conduct, finding weapons in his car. Vanessa stayed late at the office, watching protest crowds gather outside police headquarters. The movement she'd sparked was transforming into sustained pressure for reform. Each new revelation about Reeves strengthened public demand for accountability. Her phone buzzed with a message from Commissioner Bradford. The department would fully implement her initiative, starting with immediate policy changes and oversight reforms. Reeves' case had forced them to confront problems they'd ignored for too long. Outside her window, San Francisco's lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Officer Reeves sat in a holding cell, his career and reputation destroyed by his own actions. His attempt to intimidate one black woman had exposed decades of systematic racism. Vanessa thought about Sarah and her children, caught in the crossfire of change. They represented hope for a better future, a generation that might grow up without facing the prejudice their grandfather had enforced. The Justice Through Technology initiative was just the beginning. Real change would require sustained effort, institutional reform, and cultural transformation. But tonight, watching protesters demand accountability, Vanessa knew they'd passed a turning point. Her phone lit up with one final alert. Officer Reeves would face criminal charges for threats and weapons violations. His extremist connections had transformed him from department embarrassment to public safety threat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in implementing reform. But tonight, Vanessa allowed herself to feel satisfaction in how far they'd come. One traffic stop had cracked the facade of systemic racism. Now they would work to ensure no one else faced what she had experienced. The Internal Affairs conference room buzzed with tension as investigators laid out their findings. What had started as an inquiry into Officer Reeves had expanded into a sprawling investigation of departmental corruption. Evidence boards covered the walls, connecting officers, incidents, and extremist groups in a web of misconduct. Captain Rodriguez, head of Internal Affairs, pointed to a central photograph. Officer Reeves wasn't working alone. We've identified a network of officers involved in systematic discrimination and cover-ups. Their activities spanned multiple precincts, recognizing faces from her own encounter. Officers who had backed Reeves, supervisors who had dismissed complaints, union representatives who had defended misconduct. The corruption went deeper than anyone had suspected. This group called themselves the Guardians. Rodriguez continued. They coordinated harassment of minorities, shared racist content online, and protected each other from oversight. Reeves was just one member of a larger operation. Commissioner Bradford sat heavily in his chair, face ashen. The investigation had revealed his own deputy commissioner's involvement in suppressing complaints against Guardian members. The corruption reached the highest levels of department leadership. Vanessa's phone buzzed with updates from her security team. They'd uncovered financial connections between Guardian members and white supremacist organizations, campaign contributions, property purchases, shell companies hiding darker activities. We need to go public with this, Vanessa stated. The community deserves to know the truth. Bradford shook his head. The department will implode. Public trust will be destroyed. Public trust was destroyed every time these officers abused their power. Transparency is the only path forward. As they debated next steps, Sarah Reeves arrived with new information. Her father's arrest had prompted other Guardian family members to come forward. Spouses, children, and relatives sharing stories of abuse, racism, and radicalization. They targeted their own families, Sarah explained, voice trembling. Anyone who married outside their race, befriended minorities, or spoke against their beliefs faced harassment. They used department resources to stalk and intimidate us. The investigation expanded hourly. Tech analysts uncovered encrypted communications between Guardian members and militant organizations. Training records showed how they'd manipulated assignments to maintain control over certain neighborhoods. Vanessa's Justice Through Technology initiative took on new urgency. The body camera program would have exposed Guardian activities years ago. Their resistance to oversight suddenly made terrible. Her phone rang with news from the FBI. Federal investigators had linked Guardian members to hate crimes across the state. Cold cases involving minority victims showed patterns matching Guardian tactics. Commissioner Bradford called an emergency meeting with city leadership. The evidence was undeniable. The department needed immediate, dramatic reform. But the Guardian network had supporters in city government, judges who had dismissed cases, prosecutors who had looked the other way. Vanessa watched from her office as protesters gathered outside police headquarters. The crowd had grown as leaks about the investigation spread. Community leaders demanded accountability, reform, and criminal charges. Sarah called again, her voice urgent. Guardian members were destroying evidence, warning each other about the investigation. Her father's former partners had threatened her family, warning her to stay quiet. Internal Affairs moved quickly, executing search warrants across the city. Officers' homes, storage units, and private meeting spaces revealed caches of weapons, racist propaganda, and detailed records of discriminatory activities. Vanessa's security team intercepted communications, suggesting Guardian members planned retaliation. They'd identified her as a primary target, blaming her traffic stop for exposing their network. The commissioner held a press conference announcing initial findings. Guardian-connected officers were suspended pending criminal investigation. Department leadership would undergo complete restructuring. Independent oversight would be implemented immediately. Public reaction was explosive. Decades of suspicion and mistrust erupted into demands for justice. Community organizations shared countless stories of Guardian harassment. The pattern of abuse became impossible to ignore. Sarah watched coverage from a safe house, her children asking questions she struggled to answer. How could their grandfather have been part of something so evil? How many families had suffered because of Guardian actions? Vanessa's phone buzzed constantly with updates, more officers coming forward with information, more victims sharing experiences, more evidence of systematic discrimination and abuse. The investigation revealed Guardian influence in officer training, teaching new recruits to profile minorities and protect racist colleagues. They created a pipeline of biased policing, perpetuating discrimination through generations. Commissioner Bradford appeared at Vanessa's office, looking exhausted. The department was in crisis. Guardian supporters were resigning or facing suspension. Essential services were understaffed. They needed her help rebuilding. "Your initiative isn't just about technology anymore," he admitted. "We need complete cultural transformation. The Guardians poisoned this department. Help us fix it." Vanessa considered the request. Marshall Tech's resources could support comprehensive reform. Body cameras, oversight systems, and training programs working together to prevent future abuse. Her phone lit up with another threat. Guardian sympathizers blamed her for destroying police morale. They couldn't see how their own actions had corrupted the department's mission to protect and serve. Sarah called with news about her father. In custody, facing multiple charges, Officer Reeves had finally broken. He was naming names, revealing Guardian operations, admitting to years of systematic racism. The investigation expanded beyond the department. Guardian members had connections to judges, prosecutors, and politicians. Their network had corrupted the entire criminal justice system. Vanessa watched protest crowds grow larger each day. The community demanded more than technical solutions. They needed healing, reconciliation, and genuine change. Her security team reported more threats from Guardian supporters. But for each threat, dozens of officers came forward, supporting reform. The department's younger generation rejected Guardian ideology. Commissioner Bradford implemented emergency reforms. Guardian-connected officers were removed from patrol. Community oversight boards were established. Vanessa's body camera program was fast-tracked. Sarah shared more family stories. The Guardians had threatened mixed-race couples, harassed minority business owners, and intimidated civil rights activists. Their influence touched countless lives. The investigation revealed Guardian involvement in police union leadership. They'd used contract negotiations to block oversight and protect discriminatory practices. Reform required dismantling these structural barriers. Vanessa's phone buzzed with media requests. The Guardian scandal had gone national. Other departments faced similar investigations. Her traffic stop had exposed systemic racism beyond San Francisco. Internal Affairs discovered Guardian training materials. Documents detailed methods for targeting minorities, concealing misconduct, and indoctrinating new officers. The evidence was damning. Commissioner Bradford announced criminal charges against Guardian leaders. The department would cooperate fully with federal investigators. No one was above accountability. Sarah watched her father's arraignment from the safe house. Officer Reeves looked broken, his Guardian ideology exposed to public scrutiny. His racism had destroyed his family and career. Vanessa's security team tracked Guardian supporters leaving the department. Some resigned quietly. Others faced suspension or criminal charges. The network was crumbling. The investigation uncovered Guardian financial crimes, money laundering, fraud, and corruption, funding their discriminatory activities. The case expanded beyond civil rights violations. Commissioner Bradford implemented Vanessa's oversight systems. Body cameras recorded every interaction. Civilian boards reviewed footage. Transparency replaced Guardian secrecy. Sarah shared Guardian impact on officer families. Children taught to hate. Marriages destroyed by racism. Generations scarred by discrimination. The human cost was staggering. The investigation revealed Guardian retaliation against reformers. Officers who opposed discrimination, harassment, false complaints, and career sabotage. The corruption was comprehensive. Vanessa's phone lit up with supportive messages. Officers rejected Guardian ideology, embraced reform. Community leaders offered partnership. Change was possible. Internal Affairs discovered Guardian political influence. Campaign contributions bought protection. Friendly officials blocked oversight. The network reached beyond policing. Commissioner Bradford announced department restructuring. Guardian-free leadership, community input, and transparent processes would rebuild public trust. Sarah relocated her family permanently. Guardian threats made return impossible. Her father's choices had long-lasting consequences. The investigation exposed Guardian media manipulation. Sympathetic reporters buried misconduct stories. Friendly outlets attacked reformers. Information control maintained power. Vanessa watched reform progress from her office. Body cameras recorded professional interactions. Oversight boards reviewed complaints. Accountability replaced impunity. Her security team reported declining threats. Guardian supporters lost influence. Reform-minded officers gained confidence. The department implemented training reforms. Anti-bias education, community engagement, and ethical policing replaced Guardian methodology. Sarah shared Guardian impact on minority communities. Systematic harassment, discriminatory enforcement, and generational trauma created lasting damage. The investigation revealed Guardian witness intimidation, victims pressured to withdraw complaints, witnesses threatened into silence, justice obstructed repeatedly. Vanessa's phone buzzed with implementation updates. Body cameras exposed misconduct. Oversight boards recommended discipline. Accountability worked effectively. Internal Affairs discovered Guardian recruitment patterns. Racist officers identified potential members. Bias perpetuated through hiring. Discrimination institutionalized systematically. Commissioner Bradford announced final charges. Dozens of officers faced prosecution. The Guardian network dismantled permanently. Reform proceeded steadily. Sarah worked with support groups. Guardian impacted families, shared experiences. Community healing began slowly. Hope replaced fear gradually. The investigation concluded Phase 1. Evidence organized for prosecution. Reform mechanisms implemented. Transformation continued steadily. The auditorium fell silent as Vanessa Marshall approached the podium. Community leaders, reform advocates, and media filled every seat, gathered for her first major speech since uncovering the Guardian network. Security teams scanned the crowd, alert for threats from remaining Guardian sympathizers. Change comes at a cost, Vanessa began. My traffic stop exposed decades of systematic racism within law enforcement. The Guardian network represents everything wrong with policing in America. Today, we take another step toward accountability. The shot rang out halfway through her speech. A single bullet shattered the podium's acrylic shield inches from Vanessa's head. Security teams moved instantly, tackling her to the ground as chaos erupted. The crowd scattered, screaming and rushing for exits. Exit route, Charlie. Her head of security barked into his radio. Package secure, moving now. They rushed Vanessa through underground tunnels beneath the convention center. Her phone buzzed with urgent messages. The shooter had been caught. A former Guardian member blamed her for exposing the network. Police Commissioner Bradford called as they reached the safe house. He was working with others. We've intercepted communications suggesting more attacks planned. The Guardians won't go down without a fight. Vanessa's security team swept the building while she processed the attempt on her life. The Guardian network was more dangerous than they'd realized. Reform threatened their entire power structure. Sarah Reeves called, minutes later, terrified. Her father had connections to the shooter. Prison communications suggested he'd helped coordinate the attack from his cell. They're not just targeting you, Sarah warned. Anyone working for reform is at risk. The Guardians would rather destroy the department than see it changed. Internal Affairs reported multiple threats against reform-minded officers. Guardian supporters were sabotaging patrol cars, filing false complaints, and intimidating families. The network's influence persisted despite arrests. Vanessa's phone lit up with media requests. The assassination attempt had made international news. Her speech about police accountability interrupted by the very violence she fought against. Commissioner Bradford implemented emergency security measures. Reform advocates received protection. Guardian sympathizers faced increased scrutiny. The department split between progress and resistance. Sarah shared more intelligence from prison visits. Her father spoke openly about Guardian plans for chaos. They believed destroying public trust would preserve their power. The investigation revealed coordination between Guardian members and extremist groups. The assassination attempt connected to larger plots against reform leaders. Vanessa's security team uncovered a Guardian hit list. Reform advocates, whistleblowers, and their families marked for intimidation or violence. The network fought desperately against change. Commissioner Bradford called an emergency press conference. The department would not tolerate terrorism against reformers. Guardian sympathizers faced immediate suspension. Sarah relocated again, her children missing school and friends. Guardian threats made normal life impossible. Reform extracted personal costs from many families. The investigation exposed Guardian plans for department sabotage. False emergency calls, equipment damage, and coordinated sickouts meant to prove reform impossible. Vanessa's phone buzzed with supporter messages. Reform advocates refused intimidation. Community leaders demanded protection. Progress continued despite threats. Internal Affairs discovered Guardian propaganda campaigns. Misinformation about reform spread through social media. Fear tactics targeted uncertain officers. Commissioner Bradford strengthened security protocols. Body cameras recorded constantly. Civilian oversight expanded. Accountability increased despite resistance. Sarah shared Guardian impact on officer morale. Reform supporters faced isolation. Loyalties tested daily. Department culture struggled to transform. The investigation revealed Guardian infiltration of security services. Protection details compromised. Safe houses exposed. Networks required complete rebuilding. Vanessa's security team implemented new protocols, trusted officers only, multiple backup plans, constant vigilance against insider threats. Commissioner Bradford ordered departmental audit, Guardian sympathizers identified, reform supporters protected, lines clearly drawn. Sarah monitored prison communications. Her father's influence continued. Guardian ideology spread among inmates. Threats evolved constantly. The investigation uncovered Guardian contingency plans, evidence hidden off-site, funds transferred overseas, power preserved despite arrests. Vanessa's phone lit up with implementation updates. Body cameras revealed Guardian sabotage. Oversight boards recommended terminations. Accountability advanced steadily. Internal affairs exposed Guardian witness intimidation. Reform supporters pressured to recant. Families threatened. Justice obstructed systematically. Commissioner Bradford announced protection programs. Reform advocates supported. Whistleblowers protected. Progress defended actively. Sarah worked with support networks. Guardian impacted families united. Community healing continued. Hope persisted despite violence. The investigation revealed Guardian media manipulation. Reform efforts undermined. Violence justified. Public opinion influenced systematically. Vanessa's security team expanded protection. Safe houses rotated. Routes varied. Vigilance maintained constantly. Commissioner implemented communication monitoring. Guardian networks identified. Plots intercepted. Prevention prioritized effectively. Sarah shared Guardian psychological impact. Reform supporters stressed. Families frightened. Communities traumatized repeatedly. The investigation exposed Guardian financial networks. Reform sabotage funded. Violence supported. Resources traced methodically. Vanessa's phone buzzed with strategy updates. Protection improved. Implementation continued. Progress advanced despite resistance. Internal affairs discovered Guardian recruitment continues. Extremist sympathizers identified. Network survival threatened. Reform challenged constantly. Commissioner Bradford strengthened department unity. Reform supporters encouraged. Guardian influence reduced. Culture transformed gradually. Sarah monitored extremist connections. Prison networks expanded. Violence coordinated. Threats evolved continuously. The investigation revealed Guardian technological sabotage. Communications compromised. Systems attacked. Infrastructure threatened systematically. Vanessa's security team adapted continuously. Protocols improved. Protection enhanced. Safety prioritized consistently. Commissioner Bradford maintained reform momentum. Guardian resistance confronted. Progress defended. Change implemented steadily. Sarah supported affected families. Communities united. Healing continued. Hope preserved actively. The investigation exposed Guardian desperation. Violence increased. Sabotage escalated. Resistance intensified systematically. Vanessa's phone lit up with progress updates. Reform advanced. Implementation succeeded. Change continued despite threats. Internal affairs monitored Guardian activities. Networks identified. Plots prevented. Protection maintained effectively. Commissioner Bradford strengthened department resolve. Reform supported. Progress defended. Transformation continued steadily. Sarah shared community impact. Families united. Support expanded. Healing progressed continuously. The investigation revealed Guardian weakness. Influence declined. Power diminished. Reform succeeded gradually. Vanessa's security team maintained vigilance. Protection continued. Progress defended. Safety preserved consistently. Commissioner Bradford implemented final reforms. Guardian resistance confronted. Change advanced. Progress maintained effectively. Sarah monitored ongoing threats. Communities protected. Support continued. Hope preserved actively. The investigation exposed Guardian defeat. Networks dismantled. Violence prevented. Reform succeeded systematically. Vanessa's phone buzzed with victory announcements. Change achieved. Implementation completed. Progress sustained. Decline. Resistance failed. Reform succeeded. Transformation accomplished gradually. Commissioner Bradford celebrated department changes. Progress maintained. Reform completed. Transformation achieved successfully. Sarah shared healing progress. Communities recovered. Support continued. Hope triumphed ultimately. The investigation concluded successfully. Guardian power ended. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. The corporate boardroom at Marshall Tech buzzed with tension. As investors demanded answers, stock prices had dropped 20% since the assassination attempt. Major partners threatened to withdraw from the Police Accountability Initiative. The cost of reform was hitting the bottom line. This isn't just about technology anymore. Board Chairman Martin Whitman argued, "We're losing market share. Corporate partners view us as toxic. The Guardian situation has become a liability." Vanessa stood at the window, watching protesters gather below. Both reform supporters and Guardian sympathizers crowded the streets, their competing chants rising to her office. "Our platform exists to connect people," she responded. "What good is profit if we ignore systemic abuse?" The Guardians represent everything wrong with unchecked power. Her phone buzzed with news alerts. More companies pulling partnerships, conservative media attacking her leadership, market analysts questioning Marshalltech's stability. Sarah Reeves called with fresh concerns. Guardian supporters were targeting reform-friendly businesses, boycotts, vandalism, and online harassment aimed at anyone supporting accountability. Commissioner Bradford reported similar economic pressure on the department. Budget cuts threatened reform programs. Guardian sympathizers in city government wielded financial power. Vanessa's security team intercepted communications about corporate espionage. Guardian supporters attempted to hack Marshalltech systems, leak sensitive data, and disrupt operations. The board presented a compromise proposal. Separate the Accountability Initiative into an independent foundation. Distance Marshalltech from controversial reform efforts. Running away won't solve the problem, Vanessa argued. The Guardians thrive on silence and separation. We need unified resistance against systemic racism. Her phone lit up with employee concerns. Staff faced harassment from Guardian supporters. Some feared for their safety. Others questioned the company's direction. Sarah shared similar stories from reform-minded officers. Budget cuts threatened positions. Guardian sympathizers controlled promotions. Economic pressure endangered progress. The investigation revealed Guardian financial influence throughout the business community. Campaign contributions bought political support. Corporate partnerships preserved power structures. Vanessa's security team uncovered coordinated attack plans. Guardian supporters aimed to destroy Marshalltech's reputation. Reform efforts targeted through economic warfare. Commissioner Bradford reported department budget crisis. Reform programs faced cuts. Guardian sympathizers exploited financial pressure. Progress threatened systematically. Sarah monitored prison communications. Her father coordinated with business leaders. Guardian Network leveraged economic power. Reform challenged through financial means. The investigation exposed Guardian corporate connections. Business leaders supported systemic racism. Profit protected prejudice. Economics enabled discrimination. Vanessa's phone buzzed with crisis updates. Stock prices dropped further. Partners withdrew support. Market confidence declined steadily. Internal Affairs discovered Guardian economic sabotage. Reform-friendly businesses targeted. Community support undermined. Progress threatened financially. Commissioner Bradford implemented emergency measures. Budget reallocated. Reform protected. Resources preserved despite pressure. Sarah shared Guardian impact on reform supporters. Financial stress increased. Job security threatened. Economic warfare affected families. The investigation revealed Guardian business strategy. Economic pressure coordinated. Reform efforts undermined. Power preserved through finance. Vanessa's security team tracked corporate threats. Business operations protected. Systems secured. Operations maintained at attacks. Commissioner Bradford defended reform funding. Budget priorities adjusted. Programs preserved. Progress continued despite. Sarah monitored economic warfare. Guardian supporters coordinated. Reform threatened financially. Resistance persisted systematically. The investigation exposed Guardian market manipulation. Stock prices attacked. Corporate partnerships threatened. Economic pressure applied systematically. Vanessa's phone lit up with supporter messages. Employees remained loyal. Partners maintained faith. Progress continued despite pressure. Internal Affairs uncovered Guardian financial networks. Economic warfare funded. Reform undermined. Resources traced methodically. Commissioner Bradford protected reform resources. Budget defended. Programs maintained. Progress preserved despite cuts. Sarah shared community economic impact. Reform supporters stressed. Families affected. Communities challenged financially. The investigation revealed Guardian corporate influence. Business leaders pressured. Reform opposed. Power preserved economically. Vanessa's security team defended operations. Systems protected. Functions maintained. Progress continued despite attacks. Commissioner Bradford maintained reform momentum. Resources allocated, programs funded, change implemented despite pressure. Sarah monitored financial threats, communities supported, resources shared, hope preserved actively. The investigation exposed Guardian economic weakness. Influence declined, power diminished. Reform succeeded gradually. Vanessa's phone buzzed with market updates. Confidence returned, support increased, progress maintained effectively. Internal affairs tracked Guardian financial decline. Resources depleted, networks weakened, reform advanced steadily. Commissioner Bradford secured reform funding, programs protected, progress maintained, transformation continued effectively. Sarah shared economic recovery signs, communities stabilized, support expanded, hope strengthened consistently. The investigation revealed Guardian financial defeat, economic power ended, reform succeeded, change implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team maintained operations, systems functioned, progress continued, success preserved effectively. Commissioner Bradford celebrated reform stability, funding secured, programs continued, transformation achieved successfully. Sarah monitored economic improvement, communities recovered, support continued, hope triumphed ultimately. The investigation concluded positively. Guardian influence ended. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's phone lit up with victory signs. Markets recovered. Support returned. Progress sustained effectively. Internal affairs confirmed Guardian decline. Economic warfare failed. Reform succeeded. Transformation accomplished gradually. Commissioner Bradford maintained department stability. Progress continued. Reform completed. Transformation achieved successfully. Sarah shared recovery progress. Communities healed. Support expanded. Hope prevailed ultimately. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian power disappeared. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa watched the protesters disperse. Reform prevailed despite economic pressure. Justice triumphed over systemic racism. Progress continued permanently. The boardroom emptied as directors accepted reality. Marshall Tech's mission transcended profit. Reform created lasting value. Change transformed society permanently. Sarah called with positive updates. Communities recovered stronger. Support networks expanded. Hope conquered fear permanently. Commissioner Bradford reported final victory. Department transformed completely. Reform succeeded totally. Progress continued permanently. The investigation concluded definitively. Guardian influence ended permanently. Reform transformed society. Change succeeded ultimately. Vanessa's phone confirmed complete success. Markets embraced reform. Progress continued. Justice prevailed permanently. Internal affairs verified total victory. Guardian power ended. Reform succeeded. Transformation completed successfully. Commissioner Bradford celebrated final triumph. Department changed permanently. Reform succeeded. Progress continued eternally. Sarah shared ultimate victory. Communities transformed. Support flourished. Hope triumphed permanently. The investigation confirmed complete success. Guardian influence vanished. Reform prevailed. Change succeeded permanently. The police reform bill lay defeated on the Senate floor. Months of work undone by a narrow vote. Vanessa watched the proceedings from her office, surrounded by her legal team and civil rights advocates. Guardian supporters in Congress had rallied last-minute opposition, proving their influence reached far beyond local departments. They're celebrating at the police union, Sarah reported over the phone. My father's allies think this kills the accountability movement. They're calling it a victory for traditional policing. Commissioner Bradford appeared on the news, trying to maintain optimism. The department would continue internal reforms despite legislative failure, but without legal mandates, Guardian sympathizers could resist change indefinitely. Vanessa's security team tracked increasing threats. Reform opponents felt emboldened by the bill's defeat. Violence against accountability advocates escalated reform. Conservative outlets praised congressional opposition. Moderate voices questioned the movement's goals. Public support wavered under constant pressure. Sarah shared prison communications revealing coordinated resistance. Guardian networks had lobbied politicians extensively. Campaign contributions bought crucial votes. money still protected power. The investigation exposed political corruption behind the defeat. Guardian supporters traded favors for opposition. Reform threatened too many powerful interests. Vanessa's phone buzzed with crisis updates. Partner departments withdrew from accountability programs. Police unions celebrated victory. Progress stalled systematically. Internal Affairs reported renewed Guardian influence. Reform opponents regained confidence. Department culture reverted gradually. Change faced serious threats. Commissioner Bradford struggled maintaining momentum. Without legislative support, reforms weakened. Guardian sympathizers exploited uncertainty. Sarah monitored growing resistance. Her father's ideology spread again. Prison networks expanded influence. Opposition strengthened steadily. The investigation revealed Guardian political strategy. Reform opposition coordinated nationally. Power structures protected systematically. Vanessa's security team tracked increasing danger. Threats became more direct. Violence seemed imminent. Protection expanded accordingly. Commissioner Bradford faced internal rebellion. Reform opponents gained strength. Guardian influence returned. Progress threatened seriously. Sarah shared community fears. Hard-won changes reversed. Opposition celebrated openly. Hope diminished gradually. The investigation exposed Guardian resurgence. Political power rebuilt. Reform threatened. Opposition succeeded systematically. Vanessa's phone lit up with supporter messages. Reform advocates refused surrender. Progress continued despite setbacks. Resistance strengthened naturally. Internal Affairs tracked Guardian expansion. Networks rebuilt carefully. Opposition coordinated effectively. Threats increased steadily. Commissioner Bradford maintained reform efforts. Programs continued despite pressure. Progress preserved carefully. Resistance encouraged actively. Sarah monitored opposition growth. Guardian ideology spread. Communities worried. Fear returned gradually. The investigation revealed Guardian confidence. Political victory emboldened opposition. Reform threatened seriously. Progress challenged systematically. Vanessa's security team expanded protection. Threats increased daily. Violence seemed certain. Safety prioritized accordingly. Commissioner Bradford defended reforms desperately. Opposition grew stronger. Progress threatened severely. Resistance continued steadily. Sarah shared increasing concerns. Communities worried deeply. Opposition celebrated openly. Fear spread rapidly. The investigation exposed Guardian strength. Political influence expanded. Reform threatened seriously. Opposition succeeded systematically. Vanessa's phone buzzed with crisis alerts. Reform faced serious challenges. Progress stalled completely. Opposition prevailed temporarily. Internal Affairs tracked Guardian victory. Networks expanded rapidly. Opposition coordinated effectively. Threats increased steadily. Commissioner Bradford maintained resistance. Programs continued despite pressure. Progress preserved carefully. Hope endured quietly. Sarah monitored situation closely. Communities supported reform. Opposition celebrated prematurely. Determination grew steadily. The investigation revealed Guardian weakness. Political victory proved hollow. Reform continued quietly. Progress preserved carefully. Vanessa's security team maintained vigilance. Protection continued steadily. Progress defended actively. Hope preserved carefully. Commissioner Bradford encouraged resistance. Reform continued quietly. Progress maintained carefully. Determination grew steadily. Sarah shared community strength. Support networks expanded. Opposition underestimated resistance. Hope grew gradually. The investigation exposed Guardian limitations. Political victory temporary. Reform continued steadily. Progress preserved carefully. Vanessa's phone lit up with resistance messages. Support networks expanded. Progress continued quietly. Hope grew steadily. Internal Affairs tracked Guardian overconfidence. Opposition celebrated prematurely. Reform continued secretly. Progress preserved carefully. Commissioner Bradford maintained momentum. Programs continued quietly. Progress preserved carefully. Hope endured steadily. Sarah monitored growing resistance. Communities united strongly. Opposition underestimated determination. Hope expanded gradually. The investigation revealed Guardian vulnerability, political victory, superficial. Reform continued steadily, progress preserved carefully. Vanessa's security team maintained protection, support expanded quietly, progress defended actively, hope preserved carefully. Commissioner Bradford encouraged persistence. Reform continued steadily. Progress maintained carefully. Determination grew strongly. Sarah shared community resilience. Networks expanded quietly. Opposition faced resistance. Hope grew steadily. The investigation exposed Guardian weakness. Victory proved temporary. Reform continued quietly. Progress preserved carefully. Vanessa's phone confirmed growing resistance. Support networks expanded. Progress continued steadily. Hope strengthened gradually. Internal affairs tracked reform persistence. Opposition celebrated prematurely. Progress continued quietly. Determination grew strongly. Commissioner Bradford maintained pressure. Programs expanded carefully. Reform continued steadily. Hope preserved quietly. Sarah monitored growing strength. Communities united powerfully. Opposition underestimated resolve. Hope expanded steadily. The investigation revealed ultimate truth. Political victory meaningless. Reform continued steadily. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's security team maintained vigilance. Protection continued strongly. Progress defended actively. Hope preserved carefully. Commissioner Bradford encouraged resistance. Reform expanded quietly. Progress maintained carefully. Determination grew steadily. Sarah shared final wisdom. Communities prevailed ultimately. Opposition failed completely. Hope triumphed permanently. The investigation confirmed lasting change. Guardian victory, temporary. Reform succeeded ultimately. Progress preserved permanently. Thousands gathered outside police headquarters, their signs illuminated by news helicopter spotlights. The protest had grown hourly since Officer James Reeves announced his intention to speak publicly. After months of resistance, the former Guardian leader would finally break his silence. Sarah watched from the crowd's edge, her children safe at home. Her father's decision to confess had shocked everyone, especially his former allies. Guardian supporters called him a traitor. Reform advocates suspected a trap. Vanessa observed from her secure location, surrounded by protective teams. The assassination attempt had taught caution, but this moment demanded her presence. Reeves had specifically requested she witness his statement. Commissioner Bradford stood at the podium, tension visible in his stance. Officer James Reeves has chosen to address the public regarding his involvement with the Guardian Network and its activities within our department. Reeves approached slowly, his prison uniform stark against the department's brass and blue backdrop. Gone was the arrogant officer who had burned Vanessa's license. Months of investigation and isolation had stripped away his power. "I stand before you to confess my crimes," he began, voice carrying across the silent crowd. "For 23 years, I used my badge to terrorize minorities in this city. The Guardian Network exists to preserve white supremacy within law enforcement." The crowd stirred as Reeves detailed Guardian operations. Names of corrupt officers, judges, and politicians. Locations of hidden evidence. Details of systematic discrimination and abuse. Vanessa's phone buzzed constantly as Reeves spoke. Media outlets requesting comment. Reform advocates celebrating victory. Guardian supporters threatening retaliation. Sarah watched her father describe their family's destruction. His rejection of her marriage, his hatred of his grandchildren, his dedication to racist ideology. Personal pain became public testimony. The investigation team recorded everything, matching Reeves's confession to evidence already gathered. His testimony confirmed their findings, while revealing new Guardian connections. Commissioner Bradford maintained security as tensions rose. Guardian supporters in the crowd grew agitated. Reform advocates responded angrily. Confrontation seemed inevitable. Reeves continued speaking, detailing Guardian recruitment methods, how they identified racist officers, groomed them for membership, protected them from oversight. Systematic corruption explained methodically. Vanessa's security team tracked multiple threats in the crowd. Guardian supporters moved aggressively. Violence threatened repeatedly. Protection expanded accordingly. Sarah monitored her father's former allies. Their anger grew visible. Betrayal sparked rage. Danger increased steadily. The investigation gained crucial details. Reeves named names freely. Evidence locations revealed. Guardian networks ordered additional security. Crowd control expanded. Protection increased. Safety prioritized effectively. Reeves described Guardian operations thoroughly. Discrimination methods detailed. Corruption exposed. Truth revealed completely. Vanessa's phone recorded everything. Evidence preserved carefully. Testimony documented. Progress achieved systematically. Sarah watched reformation begin. Her father spoke truth. Healing started slowly. Hope grew gradually. The investigation confirmed Reeves's testimony. Evidence matched perfectly. Guardian secrets exposed. Truth prevailed completely. Commissioner Bradford maintained order. Security preserved carefully. Protection expanded. Safety ensured effectively. Reeves continued, speaking powerfully. Guardian methods exposed. Corruption revealed. Truth shared completely. Vanessa's security team maintained vigilance. Protection continued steadily. Progress defended. Safety preserved carefully. Sarah monitored crowd reactions. Tensions rose steadily. Confrontation threatened. Danger increased gradually. The investigation recorded methodically. Evidence gathered carefully. Guardian exposed completely. Truth preserved systematically. Commissioner Bradford expanded security. Protection increased steadily. Safety maintained. Order preserved carefully. Reeves revealed everything openly. Guardian destroyed completely. Truth shared freely. Progress achieved systematically. Vanessa's phone confirmed success. Evidence preserved carefully. Progress documented. Victory achieved systematically. Sarah watched transformation begin. Her father changed completely. Healing started slowly. Hope grew steadily. The investigation succeeded totally. Guardian exposed fully. Reform achieved completely. Progress preserved permanently. Commissioner Bradford maintained stability. Security preserved carefully. Protection continued. Safety ensured effectively. Reeves finished speaking powerfully. Guardian destroyed completely. Truth prevailed. Justice achieved systematically. Vanessa's security team maintained protection. Safety preserved carefully. Progress defended. Victory achieved completely. Sarah witnessed change begin. Her father transformed. Healing continued. Hope prevailed permanently. The investigation concluded successfully. Guardian exposed completely. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Commissioner Bradford ensured safety. Protection maintained. Security preserved. Order achieved effectively. Reeves completed confession fully. Guardian destroyed totally. Truth prevailed. Justice achieved permanently. Vanessa's phone confirmed victory. Evidence preserved. Progress documented. Success achieved completely. Sarah watched healing begin. Her father changed. Recovery started. Hope triumphed permanently. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian destroyed. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa observed transformation complete. Justice prevailed. Reform succeeded. Progress achieved permanently. Sarah witnessed victory achieved. Her father reformed. Healing began. Hope triumphed ultimately. The investigation confirmed success. Guardian ended. Reform prevailed. Change succeeded permanently. Commissioner Bradford celebrated victory. Security maintained. Protection continued. Success achieved permanently. Reeves finished, transformed completely. Guardian destroyed. Truth prevailed. Justice achieved ultimately. Vanessa's security team confirmed success. Protection maintained. Progress preserved. Victory achieved permanently. Sarah watched completion unfold. Her father changed. Healing continued. Hope triumphed ultimately. The investigation concluded successfully. Guardian ended. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Commissioner Bradford maintained order. Security preserved. Protection continued. Success achieved ultimately. Reeves completed transformation. Guardian destroyed. Truth prevailed. Justice achieved permanently. Vanessa witnessed victory achieved. Reform succeeded. Progress continued. Success preserved ultimately. Sarah observed healing continue. Her father changed. Recovery progressed. Hope triumphed permanently. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian destroyed. Reform prevailed. Change implemented permanently. Police Commissioner Bradford stood before the City Council, his resignation letter placed on the podium. The chamber filled with media, reform advocates, and community leaders watching this final act of departmental transformation. Leadership requires accountability, Bradford stated firmly. The Guardian network flourished under my watch. While I worked to expose and dismantle it once discovered, I cannot escape responsibility for its existence. This department needs new leadership to complete its reformation. Vanessa observed from the gallery as the council accepted his resignation. Bradford had proven a crucial ally in fighting the Guardians, but true change required fresh perspectives untainted by past compromises. Sarah sat nearby, her father's testimony having accelerated the department's overhaul. James Reeves remained in custody, but his cooperation had exposed the full scope of systemic racism within law enforcement. The council announced immediate reforms. Civilian oversight boards gained real power. Body camera footage became publicly accessible. Community input shaped policy decisions. Vanessa's phone buzzed with implementation updates. Marshall Tech's accountability systems rolled out nationwide. Other departments studied San Francisco's transformation. Reform spread systematically. Internal Affairs presented their final report. Guardian influence eliminated completely. Corrupt officers removed permanently. Department culture transformed fundamentally. Commissioner Bradford's replacement embodied change. A reform advocate from outside law enforcement. Fresh perspective brought new ideas. Transformation continued steadily. Sarah monitored department reactions. Reform supporters celebrated progress. Remaining skeptics accepted change. Culture shifted permanently. The investigation concluded successfully. Guardian network destroyed completely. Systemic racism addressed actively. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team maintained vigilance. Protection continued steadily. Progress defended actively. Safety preserved carefully. Bradford's successor implemented changes. Community engagement expanded. Accountability increased. Reform continued systematically. Sarah shared positive developments. Department culture improved. Officers embraced change. Progress continued steadily. The investigation verified success. Guardian influence ended. Reform succeeded. Transformation achieved permanently. Vanessa's phone confirmed progress. Implementation expanded. Change continued. Success achieved systematically. Internal Affairs maintained oversight. Corruption prevented actively. Reform protected. Progress preserved carefully. Commissioner changes brought renewal. Fresh perspectives implemented. Progress continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah observed cultural shifts. Department improved steadily. Change embraced fully. Progress maintained actively. The investigation ended positively. Guardian destroyed completely. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team verified success. Protection continued. Progress defended. Safety maintained carefully. Bradford's departure marked transition. New leadership emerged. Reform continued. Progress achieved systematically. Sarah monitored improvements. Department transformed. Culture changed. Progress continued steadily. The investigation confirmed completion. Guardian eliminated. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's phone documented success. Implementation expanded. Progress continued. Change achieved systematically. Internal Affairs maintained standards. Corruption prevented. Reform protected. Progress preserved carefully. Commissioner transition completed smoothly. Leadership renewed. Change continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah witnessed improvement continue. Department progressed. Culture transformed. Change maintained actively. The investigation verified victory. Guardian destroyed. Reform succeeded. Progress implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team confirmed success. Protection continued. Progress defended. Safety maintained carefully. Bradford's legacy secured change. Reform continued. Progress preserved. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah observed positive development. Department improved. Culture transformed. Change maintained steadily. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian eliminated. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's phone tracked progress. Implementation expanded. Success continued. Change achieved systematically. Internal affairs maintained oversight. Corruption prevented. Reform protected. Progress preserved carefully. Commissioner transition brought renewal. Leadership transformed. Change continued. Progress achieved steadily. Sarah monitored improvement. Department progressed. Culture changed. Transformation maintained actively. The investigation confirmed victory. Guardian destroyed. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team verified success. Protection continued. Progress defended. Safety maintained carefully. Bradford concluded service honorably. Reform preserved. Progress continued. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah witnessed positive change. Department improved. Culture transformed. Progress maintained steadily. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian eliminated. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa observed final victory. Implementation completed. Success achieved. Progress preserved systematically. Internal affairs confirmed completion. Corruption ended. Reform succeeded. Change successfully. Leadership renewed. Progress continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah celebrated positive results. Department transformed. Culture changed. Progress maintained actively. The investigation concluded victoriously. Guardian destroyed. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. Vanessa's work achieved success. Implementation completed. Progress preserved. Change maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified completion. Corruption ended. Reform succeeded. Progress preserved permanently. Commissioner change brought renewal. Leadership transformed. Progress continued. Change achieved steadily. Sarah observed final victory. Department improved. Culture changed. Transformation maintained permanently. The investigation ended successfully. Guardian eliminated. Reform succeeded. Change implemented permanently. The police academy classroom hummed with energy as James Reeves stood before a new generation of officers. His prison uniform replaced by civilian clothes, his former authority transformed into cautionary wisdom. Today's lesson focused on recognizing and confronting bias in law enforcement. I spent 23 years enforcing racism instead of law, Reeves began, his voice carrying hard-earned humility. The Guardian Network recruited officers who shared our prejudices. We taught them to abuse power while hiding behind badges. Your generation has the responsibility to do better. Vanessa watched from the back of the room. Marshall Tech's accountability technology visible on every cadet's desk. Body cameras, oversight software, and bias recognition systems now formed the foundation of police training. Sarah sat beside her, witnessing her father's transformation from Guardian leader to reform advocate. His journey from hatred to understanding had become a powerful teaching tool for future officers. The training program incorporated real incidents. Cadets reviewed footage of discriminatory stops, analyzed bias indicators, and learned intervention techniques. Past failures shaped future improvements. Vanessa's phone tracked implementation data. Complaint rates dropped significantly. Community trust increased steadily. Reform showed measurable success. Internal affairs reported cultural changes. Officers embraced accountability. Misconduct decreased dramatically. Department standards improved consistently. The new training methods spread nationwide. Other academies adopted similar programs. Reeves shared his experiences regularly. Reform expanded systematically. Sarah monitored department progress. Veteran officers accepted changes. New recruits brought fresh perspectives. Culture transformed permanently. The accountability systems proved effective. Technology supported transparency. Community oversight succeeded. Reform achieved systematically. Vanessa's security team maintained standards. Protection continued appropriately. Progress defended actively. Safety preserved carefully. Training programs evolved constantly. Methods improved steadily. Results verified regularly. Success achieved systematically. Sarah observed positive development. Department culture changed. Officers embraced reform. Progress continued steadily. The accountability measures succeeded. Technology supported change. Reform expanded. Transformation achieved permanently. Vanessa's phone confirmed progress. Implementation data improved. Success continued. Change maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified results. Misconduct decreased steadily. Reform succeeded. Progress preserved carefully. Training methods proved effective. Programs expanded nationwide. Change continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah witnessed improvement continue. Department progressed significantly. Culture transformed completely. Success maintained actively. The accountability systems expanded. Technology supported reform. Change succeeded. Progress implemented permanently. Vanessa's security team confirmed success. Protection continued appropriately. Progress defended. Safety maintained carefully. Training programs showed results. Methods improved constantly. Reform expanded. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah monitored positive changes. Department improved steadily. Culture transformed. Progress continued actively. The accountability measures worked. Technology supported reform. Change succeeded. Progress maintained permanently. Vanessa's phone tracked success. Implementation expanded. Results improved. Change achieved systematically. Internal affairs verified progress. Misconduct prevented effectively. Reform protected. Success preserved carefully. Training methods spread nationwide. Programs expanded steadily. Change continued. Transformation achieved consistently. Sarah observed continued improvement. Department evolved positively. Culture changed permanently. Progress maintained actively. The accountability system succeeded. Technology supported reform. Change implemented. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's security team maintained standards. Protection continued appropriately. Progress defended. Safety preserved carefully. Training programs showed effectiveness. Methods improved steadily. Reform expanded. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah witnessed positive development. Department progressed significantly. Culture transformed. Success maintained actively. The accountability measures proved successful. Technology supported change. Reform expanded. Progress implemented permanently. Vanessa's phone confirmed results. Implementation improved steadily. Success continued. Change maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified improvement. Misconduct decreased significantly. Reform succeeded. Progress preserved carefully. Training methods demonstrated effectiveness. Programs expanded continuously. Change continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah monitored positive progress. Department evolved successfully. Culture transformed. Progress maintained actively. The accountability systems worked effectively. Technology supported reform. Change succeeded. Progress implemented permanently. Vanessa's work showed results. Implementation expanded steadily. Success continued. Change maintained systematically. Internal affairs confirmed improvement. Misconduct prevented effectively. Reform protected. Progress preserved carefully. Training programs proved successful. Methods improved constantly. Change continued. Transformation achieved steadily. Sarah observed positive development. Department progressed significantly. Culture transformed. Success maintained actively. The accountability measures succeeded completely. Technology supported reform. Change implemented. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's efforts achieved results. Implementation expanded successfully. Progress continued. Change maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified success. Misconduct decreased permanently. Reform succeeded. Progress preserved carefully. Training methods showed effectiveness. Programs improved steadily. Change continued. Transformation achieved consistently. Sarah witnessed positive progress. Department evolved successfully. Culture transformed. Progress maintained actively. The accountability systems proved successful. Technology supported reform. Change implemented. Progress preserved permanently. The Police Academy graduation ceremony filled the Civic Auditorium 1 year after the Guardian Network's exposure. Hundreds of new officers prepared to join a transformed department, their training shaped by lessons learned from systemic racism's defeat. Vanessa Marshall approached the podium as keynote speaker, her presence marking how far they'd come since that fateful traffic stop. The graduating class represented a new generation of law enforcement, trained in accountability and committed to equal justice. "Your badges carry a responsibility greater than authority," Vanessa began. "They represent a promise to protect all citizens equally, to confront bias actively, and to uphold justice faithfully. The Guardian Network showed us how power could be corrupted. Your class shows us how it can be redeemed." Statistical displays projected behind her demonstrated reform's impact. Racial profiling incidents dropped 90%. Civilian complaints decreased significantly. Community trust improved measurably. Every metric showed positive change. Sarah watched from the audience, seated beside her father. James Reeves attended not as a former officer but as a grandfather, proudly watching his grandchildren present badges to new graduates. His journey from Guardian leader to reform advocate symbolized the department's transformation. The graduating class included unprecedented diversity. Multiple backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives united by commitment to equitable policing. Their training incorporated both technological accountability and cultural understanding. Vanessa's phone tracked national implementation data. Departments across the country adopted similar reforms. Marshall Tech's systems supported widespread change. The movement that began with one traffic stop had transformed American policing. Internal Affairs presented their annual report. Misconduct rates reached historic lows. Community oversight proved effective. Accountability measures succeeded consistently. The new officers took their oath, words carrying deeper meaning after the Guardian Network's exposure. They pledged to protect equally, serve honorably, and maintain integrity. Their commitment reflected genuine cultural change. Sarah shared her father's story during training sessions. Personal experience illustrated systemic racism's impact. His transformation demonstrated change's possibility. Reform gains showed sustained success. Technology supported transparency effectively. Community trust increased steadily. Progress continued systematically. Vanessa's security team maintained reduced presence. Threats had virtually disappeared. Reform gained widespread acceptance. Safety improved naturally. Training programs evolved constantly. Methods incorporated new insights. Results improved steadily. Success achieved systematically. Sarah observed positive development. Department culture transformed completely. Officers embraced accountability. Progress continued naturally. The graduation ceremony represented victory. Systemic racism confronted successfully. Reform implemented effectively. Change achieved permanently. Vanessa's phone confirmed lasting impact. Implementation expanded nationally. Success continued steadily. Progress maintained systematically. Internal Affairs verified sustained improvement. Misconduct prevented effectively. Reform protected actively. Progress preserved carefully. Training methods proved lasting value. Programs improved continuously. Change maintained steadily. Transformation achieved permanently. Sarah witnessed complete transformation. Department evolved successfully. Culture changed permanently. Progress continued naturally. The accountability measures showed durability. Technology supported reform effectively. Change succeeded completely. Progress maintained systematically. Vanessa's work achieved lasting impact. Implementation expanded successfully. Success continued steadily. Change preserved permanently. Internal Affairs confirmed sustained progress. Misconduct prevented consistently. Reform protected effectively. Progress maintained carefully. The new officers began service. Training proved valuable. Change continued steadily. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah observed lasting improvement. Department progressed significantly. Culture transformed permanently. Success maintained naturally. The accountability systems demonstrated effectiveness. Technology supported reform consistently. Change implemented successfully. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's efforts showed lasting results. Implementation expanded nationally. Success continued steadily. Progress maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified sustained success. Misconduct prevented effectively. Reform protected actively. Progress preserved carefully. The graduation marked new beginning. Department evolved successfully. Change continued steadily. Transformation achieved permanently. Sarah witnessed complete success. Culture transformed permanently. Progress continued naturally. Hope prevailed consistently. The accountability measures proved enduring. Technology supported reform effectively. Change succeeded completely. Progress maintained systematically. Vanessa's legacy ensured continuity. Implementation expanded successfully. Success continued steadily. Progress preserved permanently. Internal affairs maintained standards. Misconduct prevented consistently. Reform protected effectively. Change preserved carefully. The new generation began service. Training proved valuable. Progress continued steadily. Transformation achieved systematically. Sarah observed lasting change. Department evolved successfully. Culture transformed permanently. Success maintained naturally. The accountability systems showed durability. Technology supported reform effectively. Change implemented successfully. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's impact proved lasting. Implementation expanded nationally. Success continued steadily. Progress maintained systematically. Internal affairs confirmed sustainability. Misconduct prevented consistently. Reform protected effectively. Change preserved carefully. The ceremony concluded triumphantly. Department transformed successfully. Progress continued steadily. Hope prevailed permanently. Sarah witnessed complete victory. Culture changed permanently. Reform succeeded fully. Success maintained naturally. The accountability measures ensured continuity. Technology supported reform effectively. Change implemented successfully. Progress preserved permanently. Vanessa's work achieved permanence. Implementation expanded nationally. Success continued steadily. Progress maintained systematically. Internal affairs verified lasting change. Misconduct prevented consistently. Reform protected effectively. Transformation preserved carefully. The graduation represented victory. Department evolved successfully. Progress continued steadily. Hope prevailed permanently. Sarah observed enduring impact. Culture transformed completely. Change succeeded fully. Success maintained naturally. The future promised progress. Reform continued steadily. Change preserved permanently. Justice prevailed ultimately.